So, yeah, I'm just recording this session as well so that some people who are not there can benefit from it. Okay. So, if you look at what we have done till now, right? I'm giving you a brief summary, right? We have understood what is atomic number, right? As the number of protons, okay? And we have been able to write what is called the electronic configuration, right? Electronic configuration means how the electrons are arranged around the atomic nucleus, right? 281, 282, and all that stuff. From there, we are able to say what is the valency of the element, by using the principle of octet or duplet, right? We saw that 8 electrons in the outer shell means stable. So we use that principle to find out how many electrons are donated, are accepted, or shared, which is what we are calling as valency, for the atoms to get the octet configuration. Okay. Once you know the valency, we were able to write the chemical formula for a compound. Am I right, guys? Is this all that we did so far? For example,
Yes,
if you say NaCl, we know Na's valency is 1 and Cl's valency is 1. So we did the crisscross formula and say the molecular formula for the compound is NaCl, right? Likewise, we also learned about what are called radicals, right? And we understood that radicals are a group of atoms, and these have a ionic charge present on them, right? SO4 2 minus, right? CO3 2 minus, right? And then with this knowledge, we are able to write the chemical formula of compounds which have radicals. For example, Vibodh will tell me, how do I do the chemical formula for sulfuric acid, Vibodh?
we should take sulfur and
Doesn't matter. You think about it. So much, can you please help Vibodh and me out here? Sulfuric acid, how shall we find the formula?
Yes, sir. Sir, along with the charge, right, sir?
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Please, no, sir. Can I keep my video off? Please, sir? My net is not.
No problem. Keep your video off, okay? Meghna, can you help us, Somansh and Vibodh?
Yes, sir. So you'll write hydrogen and SO4, and you'll write the hydrogen's charge 1 and SO4 is 2, and then you'll crisscross it and you'll get H2SO4.
H2SO4. Very good. So, guys, this is what I am saying, that you should be, whatever we have done so far, you should keep on top of that, okay? So what Meghna says is, first she recognizes that sulfuric acid is a compound that is formed by hydrogen and a sulfate ion. So what she is telling, hydrogen valency, she is putting it as 1. Or you can say +1, this is -2. Okay, even if you don't do also, it's fine. Then you do the crisscross method, you are able to say it is H2SO4. Shruti, can we work together and find out what the formula for ammonia is going to be?
Yes, sir. Nitrogen N and hydrogen H. The valency of nitrogen nitride ion is 3.
Oh, hold on. Here, I should write hydrogen first, always. Whichever is going to exhibit the valency, positive valency, okay? We will put it as here, and then nitrogen we'll keep it next. Whichever wants to accept electrons and become anion, no? Anion we write on the right-hand side, okay? We'll put cations or metals. we'll write on the left hand side. And here we will write non-metals, we will write on the right hand side. So H and the nitrogen, likes to take 3 electrons and complete its octet. So we say 3. And then we get this as H3N or NH3. Okay, so in this way, we using the concept of valency and using the concepts of radicals and the charge, we have learned how to do the molecular formula, right guys? And
So we also did balancing.
I'm going to write that down. So I'm into chemical formula till now, and then we come to we wrote chemical equations and we know how to balance the reaction. Okay, balancing means what we said. There are different molecules which take part in the reactions. We call them the reactants. And they are going to combine together and they are going to give some products. Okay, so we said, for example, hydrogen and oxygen combine together to form water. What we said is balancing is nothing but whatever atoms are there on the left hand side, the reactant side, should be equal to the number of atoms on the right hand side, product side. So we try to equate it. And we get this balancing as 2H2 plus O2 gives rise to 2H2O. We have seen some rules, some tips we have seen, and we balanced a couple of equations, isn't it? So this is where we are in our journey to learn chemistry. Do you agree with me, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes,
So, yes, I do know that you people are not yet 100% here. For example, radicals, if I say, tell me what is a carbonate charge, what is carbonate formula, sulfate formula, phosphate formula, you might not know. So this is a very important thing for you to learn, okay? Because without this, you will not be able to say the chemical formula. Without this, you will not be able to write a reaction. And then forget, you can't do the balancing. So please, there is very clearly important radicals have been given in your textbook. We have also seen it in our class last. Okay, you have to learn that. And atomic number at least till 20. Okay, 9th standard till 20 till calcium. You must remember that. Is it all right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you realize that the knowledge that we have now, right, is more than the combined knowledge of the following scientists? Okay, if you see Boyle has given Boyle's law. Okay, he was a chemist, he was a scientist. Charles, okay, Gay-Lussac, all these fellows were involved in what are called gas laws. Forget them. Even if you take Dalton, okay, these guys also did not have the knowledge that all of us have now. Okay, they didn't know that, for example, Dalton didn't know the formula for water is H2O, isn't it? So if I tell Vibodh Watman, I'm asking you sulfuric acid, you don't know, don't feel bad, okay? Because Dalton, he gave the famous atomic theory, right? He didn't know the formula for water was H2O. Neither did he know that hydrogen was not H, hydrogen existed as H2. Okay, so we have come a long way in our knowledge. So what we should do now, all of you unmute yourself. Unmute your microphones, all of you. I want all of you to unmute and stay unmuted, please. Doesn't matter. If there are any surrounding noises, also fine.
Let me ask this question.
Unmute yourself and give ourselves a nice clap. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, can you just applaud ourselves for 5 seconds? Go ahead and clap ourselves. Go ahead, applaud ourselves. Because see, we are better than all the scientists, right? Boyle, Charles.
Sir, if they had the education we had right now, they would have been
No, I'm not discrediting them so much. See, they're all gods. Okay.
Yes, sir. They are the one who founded like
Yeah,
basic.
without them, we see. Having said that, see, though I have made a small fun of the scientists and we have patted ourselves on the back. The thing is that it's without their systematic experiments, systematic experiments, findings, right? And converting these findings into laws, right? And then creating this as a knowledge base, none of this would have happened. So actually, we should, when we clapped ourselves and patted ourselves in the back, indirectly, we are also paying respects to them because they have made science so easy that a ninth grader can know that, isn't it? People like you and me. Okay, we can, even sixth grader, seventh grader, ninth grader is able to know more about chemistry, which has taken them hundreds of years, 200, 300 years they have taken in order to come to a certain level. But we are able to learn that in 2-3 years. So a lot of respects we have to pay them because it is because of their efforts that we are able to learn chemistry so easily as a science. Okay, so we are not belittling them or we are not making fun of them in any way. Is it okay so much?
Yes, sir. I was just
Yeah.
simply mentioning that point.
Yeah. At the same time, see, now when we are able to, learn electronic configuration, this, that, atoms, it's like too much of like 200, 300 years of knowledge that these guys gather. We as children, I mean, you as children, we as teachers, we have to exchange with each other. So that's a huge, it's all because of them. Okay. So that's one thing. Next, what is the things which I want to cover today? All right. I want to progress and I want to introduce to you what is called the law of constant proportion. Some of you may know it, or you may have been taught in school, or you may know a little bit here and there. Doesn't matter. But we have to do law of constant proportion. Then we have to understand more about relative atomic. They used to call it weight, but actually weight is not a right term. Relative atomic mass, okay, and relative molecular mass. When I say atomic/molecular, right? This concept we have to understand. Then the third concept which I want to discuss with you is called the law of conservation of mass. And one more concept which I want to discuss with you is called the mole concept. Okay, so if everything goes well, these 4 things I should be doing by the end of the day today. And I need your support for that. Is it all right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So what you could do is you could just make a mental note that we need to do law of constant proportion, relative atomic/molecular mass. They are one and the same. People used to use the term weight, but weight, is not correct because it depends on gravity.
Gravity.
Mass is the correct term to use. Law of conservation of mass and mole concept. These are the 4 things which I want to discuss with you today. All right. So while we are trying to do this, right, there is a certain chronology of events. Okay, these 4 things I want to do for you. Okay, but it is always good if you learn these things with a chronology in mind. What do I mean by that? Okay, so let me just write it. Law of constant More concept with a certain chronology in mind means how did things happen in history, in the history of chemistry. Okay, how did things happen in the history of chemistry? In what sequence? In what sequence did it happen? And what did it result in? Okay, we want to kind of try to do a mapping here, right? So this is very important because the textbooks, the teachers don't do justice to the way chemistry unfolded, the history of chemistry unfolded. So we have to kind of learn it in the right way. And one disclaimer here, disclaimer means one thing which I want to tell you outright, okay, is that you may not understand everything that we are going to talk about today, but the fact that you've heard about it and you say, hey, uncle discussed something about Charles' law or Boyle's law, okay, you should be able to remember it in that sequence. You'll be making notes of it so that tomorrow or in the coming years, when you're learning a particular concept, you will be able to correlate. So one disclaimer is, it is not necessary that you understand or learn everything that we are talking about. Okay, but we should, try to see what is the chronology and what event has helped us in coming with the respective concept. Is it all right, guys? I'm setting the context for today's class. All right. So I will take you to a particular sheet that I have made. With some time. So people who are interested, you can quickly make a note of the year and the event because this is very important. And I'm also recording this, so you can use this, recording. I'll be publishing the link to you later on, should you want to refresh yourself, okay? See, the first important event that happened in chemistry, you can say, is in 1662, as per our current learnings are concerned. Okay, the scientist Boyle has come out with the first of the laws called Boyle's law, where he tried to give a relationship between the pressure and volume of a gas. Okay, so basically, what is the volume occupied by a gas? What is the pressure? Okay, we call that as a PV relationship. Okay, ICSE folks have gas laws in 9th standard, and you will know that the pressure and volume of a gas are inversely proportional to each other. Okay, so if you are increasing the pressure, volume will reduce. You can very easily imagine a balloon, right? If I can just try to explain this in a very high level, you take a balloon, okay, and fill it with air, and the balloon's volume will be, let's say, something 100, okay, 100 cc. And then what you do, you put this balloon inside a vacuum chamber. Vacuum chamber means it's just a jar, and it is on a tabletop or some sealed top. And what you could do here is you could suck out the air from inside. Okay, you use a motor and you can just remove the air. When you remove the air, what happens? The pressure inside will drop. Okay, pressure inside will drop when you remove the air through this motor, or you can say this is a vacuum pump. Can you imagine what will happen to the volume of the balloon?
It will increase.
It will increase. Very good. I really like your insight into this, right? The balloon becomes bigger because what happens is the pressure, outside pressure, air pressure was acting on it and was keeping it small. The minute the motor was switched on and it sucked out the air from the outside, the pressure became less. Once this pressure became less, the size of the balloon becomes bigger. So this is what
the gas molecules can move more freely around when the pressure is decreased. There's no other.
So inside here, these molecules, they can they are not they are the outside pressure. Okay, when it becomes less, then these molecules can expand. The balloon can become bigger. So this is what was Boyle's law in effect. He said that the volume of the balloon is inversely proportional to pressure. Means if you make the pressure less, volume is more. Likewise, second thing is if you add more air inside, do the ulta of this, put more air inside, bus karke you leave it. Then what happens? The volume of the balloon becomes small. Okay, so when you let air inside, then you are making the pressure more. If you make the pressure more, volume becomes less. So this is what is called the Boyle's law. Okay, I'm telling it to you in a very simple way. No need for you to remember this because this is there for ICSE, not there for CBSE. So we say V is inversely proportional to 1 by P, or PV is equal to K. This is what is called the Boyle's law. This happened in the year 1662. Did you follow this, guys?
Yes, sir. So actually, when you put a balloon in a vacuum, it actually acts the same as how a human lung would act if it were exposed in space. It would start to expand, and then because there's no more,
correct.
It would explode.
Yes, correct. If you go in space,
so sir, does this apply for even a plastic wrapper, airtight filled with air?
Yeah, balloon, anything that has volume. And that the membrane can expand, right? If supposing you take a solid steel container and put it, okay, the gas cannot freely expand. Okay, if you put it in a plastic container, if you put it in that balloon kind of material which can flex, then you can visibly see this. Are you able to follow this, guys? Yeah, I was telling that when scientists go into space, they have to wear the space suits.
So we actually couldn't hear your answer because
radio's frozen.
When we couldn't hear your audio. So we didn't hear your answer whatsoever.
Okay, no problem. I have turned my video off so that you can hear me. Some internet issue had come perhaps. So what I had said was, if you use any container, enclosure, let's not say container, enclosure. Like balloon is made up of a thin material, which can freely expand and which can contract. Or you can also take a plastic container, plastic, flimsy material, which can expand. Plastic cannot expand much. So balloon is something which can actually expand. If you take that material, you can physically see the volume of the gas increasing and decreasing. Is it all right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And those of you who would like to make a note, quickly make a note, whatever experiment we said. This particular thing is important. V is inversely proportional to 1 by P, or P into V is equal to K. And this Boyle's law. This is the first event that we should.
And so what is the value of K? Is that just the answer?
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about what the value of K is. Just say that P into V is a constant.
So what does K stand for?
It's a constant. PV is equal to K is a constant. In fact, what they do, they say, oh, this is for gas. Let's say you took hydrogen gas. Okay, you can take a different gas, nitrogen gas also you can take. You can take ammonia gas also. Okay, then what you could do, you take this hydrogen gas and then you subject it to different pressures, different volumes. Okay, so you say hydrogen. At pressure P1, what is your volume? Okay, multiply this P1 into V1. Then for the same hydrogen gas, at pressure P2, what is your volume? Multiply this P2, V2. Same thing for P3V3. What they found is P1V1 is equal to P2V2 is equal to P3V3 is equal to some constant K. Are you following this, guys?
Yes, sir.
What is this P1 and V1 means? Different pressures, because when you are able to remove the pressure inside, it was P1, now it will become P2. When you are further trying to increase the pressure, it is P2, now it has become P3. So whatever the pressure may be, correspondingly volume will increase or decrease such that the product of this is going to remain a constant. And this is true for all gases. You can take nitrogen, you can take ammonia, any gas will give you the same, result. Is it all right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Next, what happened? We would like to move into the next event that has happened. See, I don't want to detail to you each and every of these things. Okay. The discovery of hydrogen gas. This happened in 1766. Till then, hydrogen as a gas was not, as an element was not known. Okay. So this was done by a scientist by name Henry Cavendish. Amrita, are you following this, ma? Can you please make a
Yes,
note
sir.
also? Constantly you should be writing. Then only, you're learning. It's not just listening. You're making notes, you're asking questions, you're following. It should be active. Okay, 1766, this fellow hydrogen gas was discovered. And then in the year 1774, oxygen gas was discovered. And this was done by a scientist by name Joseph Priestley. Okay, so 1662 Boyle's law, 1766 the discovery of hydrogen gas, 1774 the discovery of oxygen gas by Joseph Priestley. And then the second gas law was discovered by Charles. Okay, Charles, that is what we say is Charles' law, and it comes under gas laws. What this Charles' law talks about is volume and temperature relationship. Okay, so you come till here, write Charles' law and say volume temperature relationship. I'll briefly explain to you. Are you able to see me writing here, guys?
Yes, so we can see you right.
Yes,
Would you
sir.
mind going back for a second, please?
Yes, I'll do
Yes.
that. I'll do that, yes. That's why I said, try to quickly note down. Tuck, 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 karke. Don't be slow on this. Make a note of this so we can progress in our discussion. Active participation, I want.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Done, sir.
All right.
Done, sir.
Done.
All right. Okay. So I was trying to explain to you what Charles did. Okay. He established a relationship between volume and temperature. Of gas. All these fellows have worked with gases. And now Charles, he has more gases to work with because hydrogen also has been discovered, oxygen also has been discovered. And what he found out was, if you increase temperature, okay, what is going to happen? You take some, supposing you have a piston cylinder arrangement, right? Means this piston. The piston is the one which I'm marking in the shaded line. Sorry, come again. Okay.
2 times pressed here.
Someone has to be in mute. Okay. So let's supposing you have hydrogen gas inside. Okay. This is like a sliding member. We call this as a piston. And this is like a cylinder. This is what is there in all the scooters, cars, all automobiles. Okay, piston cylinder arrangement. We take the air fuel mixture inside and we burn it. So, okay, this you know, guys. Most of you will know this used in your day-to-day life. Can you tell me what this one where you use such an arrangement? Where you have a piston and cylinder. All of you have used it.
Syringe.
Syringe, yes, very good. More thing, this thing is cycle pump. In order to fill air inside your tube. So you have that long white cylinder inside the you will be filling it, no? So that is also piston cylinder arrangement. Is it all right, guys? Because yes. I want you to imagine when I say piston cylinder, it's not something you've not seen, okay? It's in your everyday experience. All right, so what do we do here? So let's assume that this is at ambient temperature, means 27 degrees something is there. This is going to occupy a volume. Now you supply heat to it. Once you supply heat to it, what do you think is going to happen?
Volume will increase.
Very good. That means this heat is given to the gas and the molecules of the gas, they will vibrate more rigorously. First, they'll be going like slowly. Now they will be vibrating quite vigorously. Because of that, what happens? They will be pushing this fellow and the piston will move behind. It will be like this. It will become like this. That means whatever was the volume inside earlier, now the volume has increased. Are you able to follow this, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this was, it seems very straightforward now. Everyone is able to say that. But then this was the first time experimentally demonstrated by Charles in the form of a law. And he says, if you increase the temperature, then volume also is going to increase. Or he said that V is directly, temperature T is directly proportional to V. Okay, or V is directly proportional to T. V by T is a constant. Don't worry about what this K is. It is just a proportionality constant. Correct now? Okay, so just like we could come out with a relationship for Boyle's law, we can say that V1 by T1 is equal to V2 by T2 is equal to V3 by T3. All of this will be equal to K. That means he's saying, Array, you take this fellow gas, hydrogen, and you give different temperature, 127 degrees centigrade, and note down the corresponding volume. That is your T1 and V1. Then you increase the temperature, you check out how much this fellow's temperature became. Let's say T2 was 40 degrees centigrade. Then it will have some V2. Again, you increase it, let it become 75 or 100 or whatever. That is your T3 and V3. So each time when you do this experiment, you will see that the product of this, the ratio of this V1 by T1 will be equal to V2 by T2 will be equal to V3 by T3. Are you following this?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Sir, the piston is pushed back because due to the increase in kinetic energy, sir.
Sorry, come again.
Piston is pushed back because due to the increase in kinetic energy in the
Yes, correct. Yes, so this is the stepping stone for, you see, you have what is called the kinetic theory of gases. So I don't want to, bombard you with a lot of information, but this temperature volume dependency, okay, has actually given us a lot of insight into, the motion of gases, okay, and what we call as the kinetic energy possessed by the atoms or molecules of a gas. Okay, because they have what is called random motion. They'll be moving. So if you increase the temperature, their motion will become more. Okay, it is called the root mean square velocity of the gas. VRMS, they say. I'm just throwing some terms at you. You don't need to worry about it. Okay, but yes, all these are very, very important, in their higher grades. And what happens is when temperature increases, yes, the kinetic, the average energy of the gas is going to increase. Okay, and what happens is they will keep bombarding against the walls of the container, and this fellow can move, right? So it is going to move. So the movement of the piston is directly because of increased pressure. Increased pressure. Why did the pressure increase? What is this pressure? The pressure exerted by the gas on the piston. The pressure exerted by the gas on the piston has increased. Why did it increase? Because the velocity of gas is increased. Why did the velocity increase? Because the temperature was increased. So temperature, velocity, pressure, all these kinetic energy, all these are linked. And the first step towards understanding all this was our Charles Fellow and our Charles Law. Kalash, are we okay till here?
Yes, sir.
So tomorrow, if someone says, what is Charles' law, what is Boyle's law, you should be able to give a high level without getting confused, because these are straightforward things, and it is in our experience. We are able to imagine this. All right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So when you wrote on increased pressure, and below that, velocity of what, sir?
Velocity of gases means I was just trying to tell you, why does the piston move? Why?
Sir, was using Charles' law only that kinetic energy increases due to the heat energy discovered?
Not just by him. See, what I am telling you is the entire science of kinetic theory of gases is as a consequence of Charles' law, Boyle's law, Gay-Lussac's law, combined gas law. Many things have happened.
Okay.
So,
yes,
but this is like a starting point. Boyle's law and Charles' law are like starting point.
yes, sir.
The fact that temperature affects the the molecular motion, the random motion of molecules inside the gases. So that as a concept came because of these fellows, specifically because of Charles.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So to answer the other question, why does the piston move? Because gas is exerting, the gas which we are having inside the cylinder, that is exerting more pressure. It is exerting more pressure on piston. Why is it exerting more pressure on piston? Because its velocity is more. Velocity has become more. Its velocity has increased. Velocity means don't think it is like straight velocity. It is the random velocity with which the molecule of the gas is vibrating. Why did the velocity increase? Because you increase the temperature. So this is how the relationship goes. Increase in temperature results in increase in the velocity of the gas, which results in the increase in the pressure. Because of that, the piston is pushed out. Are you following this, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right. So this is something about Charles' law. Now let's get back to our chronology of events. Okay. And this is in the year 1787. See, between 1662 1787, already 100 years have passed. 1662 plus 100, 1772. and another 15 years. See how much time has happened. We have learned that in 15 minutes. But here, 115 years have transpired before one law to the next. And then 1801 is the event we are interested in, because I told you law of constant proportion is what we want to discuss. This was given by the scientist Joseph Proust. Very important that you remember this fellow, Joseph Proust, 1801. He's the guy who gave law of constant proportion.
So I know Joseph Louis.
Yeah, that's his first name, Joseph Louis Proust. If you say Proust, it's enough.
Yes.
It's like Anand, Subramanian, my full name. Okay, Proust is the
Yes, sir.
name. Joseph Louis is his first name, middle name, whatever. All right. So this 1801, which I have marked in yellow, has certain other events which are listed to that. Okay. I will quickly take you through this. I want you to focus on that. So the culmination of these events in 1789, 1792, and 1801 together have led to this law of constant proportion discovery. So we should pay attention to that. What is that? Lavoisier. He did a chemical analysis on water. Okay, so scientists then see, they may not know the formula for water. What is H2O? They didn't know H2, the formula for water was H2O. But they were very good at doing chemical analysis, and they found out, Lavoisier found out that water was 85% of oxygen, 15% of hydrogen by weight or by mass. Please remember this. Are you able to understand this, Rohan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So he's the guy who has given a chemical, percentage. He has given a percentage of oxygen and hydrogen by mass or by weight. Okay, wherever weight is used, please replace it with mass, because weight is not a right word. Then second fellow, 1792. Who is this guy? There's this scientist you will never hear in your lifetime. Okay, there's a guy called Jeremias Benjamin Richter in 1792. Okay, he said that. Can someone read this, please? Richter found out. Rohan, can you please read this?
From Richard found that.
Yeah.
Richard found that the ratio by weight of the compounds consumed in a chemical reaction was always the same. Took 615 parts by weight of magnesia, MgO, for example, to neutralize 1000 parts by weight of sulfuric acid.
So now if you see this, people are doing different experiments different ways. So here he's talking about a neutralization reaction. We will not go about it now. Okay, but people are talking about, hey, how much should I take? Some 15 parts by weight. Means if I take 615 grams, then 1000 grams of sulfuric acid by weight I can neutralize. Once again, the focus is on the percentage or the proportion in which two things are going to combine. And then comes the third one in 1801.
So is Jeremias
Benjamin Richter. Yes.
Richter, he isn't the same guy who isn't Richter. He isn't the same guy who figured out the Richter scale.
Richter scale, I don't think so.
Because Richter is because here that's the same scale.
I have not made that. I think that's called the Richter scale, no? RITCHER, right?
So from whatever I've heard, I've always heard as Richter. That's why.
It's a Richter scale.
Richter, I admit that I don't know this. Okay, so it may be the guy or it may be a different fellow. having said that, I'll look it up and get back to you on this.
So I think it's RICT or the other Richter.
Richter, because I feel that these are different people, okay? But, I will check it and come back to you. Is it all right?
So it is a different Richter. It's
Because
someone else called Charles.
Yeah.
this is
Yes.
Richter. This fellow is Richter, and that may be a different.
So
what
same
did I
spelling of Richter. Same spelling of Richter, but just Charles Francis.
Charles.
Richter.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for clarifying.
Because it's it's more than a decade, a century
Okay.
in difference. That's why.
Okay, no problem. But if you come here, the focus is on percentage by mass. Okay, proportion. Now you come and read this fellow. Kalash, can you please read this? 1801.
Between 1798 and 1808, Joseph Louis Proust analyzed different sources of several compounds. He found that they always contain the same ratio by weight of their elements. Table salt, for example, always contained 1.5 times as much chlorine as sodium. He also found that water always contained 8 times as much oxygen as hydrogen. Finally, he found that the mineral known as cinnabar always contains 6.25 times as much mercury as sulfur. These results led Proust to propose the law of constant composition, which states that the ratio by mass of the elements in a chemical compound is always the same, regardless of the source of the compound.
So we will just discuss about it in a bit. But basically, this Proust, Joseph Louis Proust, okay, in 1801, he did all these studies, and then he gave this law called law of constant proportion. Okay, so we will go ahead and detail out what this law is. This is my first thing which I want to discuss. Okay, see, this law of constant composition is given by different names. We also say law of definite proportion.
So we actually covered a bit of law of definite proportions when we first started.
Yeah,
So like a
correct.
chemical compound always contains the same
we did
element.
do that. We did do that. Okay, we are kind of reiterating that in the context of the mole concept now. Okay, I'm presenting to you a more holistic picture. Okay, law of constant composition or law of definite proportion. What this means is this is the recipe of the compounds. Okay, for example, if you see any cookery channel now in YouTube, they will start off by saying, you have to take pepper so much, adha chammach, right? Half spoon. Then they'll say you have to take jeerige or whatever that thing, asafoetida. They will say 1 spoon, right? Then they'll tell you have to take kali mirch or red mirch. They will say 2 spoons, right? And then what happens if you do all these things? You get some masala powder, right? So you cannot change this these measures. It is always you have to keep the measure, otherwise you will not get the proper final product, right? Or you can take anything. If you see pizza, if you take coffee, whatever it is, the ingredients, okay? The ingredients always have to be in a certain proportion by mass. This is the key word. You have to know that they will always exist in a certain proportion by mass. Okay, so that is what this law of constant proportion says. So if he says you take water, you take water from Ganga river, you take water from Himalayas, you take water from your well, Okay, if it is as long as it is pure water, it is always going to contain a certain proportion of hydrogen and certain proportion of oxygen by mass. That is what is called law of constant proportion. Okay, and what did they find out? All right, this you have talked about hydrogen and oxygen. No, they say water is always 1:8. Okay, by mass. That means you say hydrogen is to oxygen is 1:8 in water. So this is not, it is not that hydrogen and oxygen always combine in the same way. No, in water, hydrogen and oxygen will always exist in the ratio of 1:8 by mass. Are you able to follow this, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this 1:8 is the universe's recipe. Universe's recipe for this compound called water. Because these are all our mother's recipe. Mother's, brothers, auntie's recipe for making rasam powder, sambar powder, coffee powder, all that stuff. This is nature's recipe for making the compounds. Okay, then you will say, "Array, how do I remember all these things? It is so difficult." No, it is actually quite easy. If you take, for example, carbon dioxide, okay, what you need to do, you need to take this fellow's atomic weight and write it. Carbon, for example, we know is 12, isn't it? What about oxygen?
60.
60.
O is 16. O2 is going to be
32.
36. So you take 12 and 36. 4 3s are 12. 4 9s are 36. Correct? 3 1s are 3. 3 3s are 9. That means carbon and oxygen always combine in the ratio of 1:3 in carbon dioxide by mass. Are you following this, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. I would like you take a minute and please make a note till here. Whatever I said, what do you mean by law of constant composition? Okay. In fact, I will dictate it for you, and or rather, it is there in the Excel sheet. I'll share it with you. And these 1 or 2 examples which I had written, I want you to make a note of it. This last statement which is there is nothing but law of constant proportion, constant composition. Okay, I'm just making it bold for you. Go ahead and write it down. Sorry, guys, I made a small mistake. Oxygen is 32. I've written it as 36, right?
Yes, sir.
Oxygen is 16:2 is 32. So it will not be 1:3. It is 12:32. So 4 3s are 12, 4 8s are 32. The moment I wrote it, I knew something was wrong. So it is 3:8 by mass.
Yes, sir.
Carbon and oxygen. Oxygen is 16. 16:2 is 32. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm going back. Sorry? Yes.
Yes, I think he just asked.
Yes.
Cool.
So law of constant proportion, law of definite composition, law of constant composition, different terms they use. But when the word constant or definite is there, then we are talking about the same thing.
Yes.
Okay. So in this, once you've written this down, you can take these two examples. Hydrogen and oxygen is always 1:8. And carbon and oxygen is always 3:8. Okay, for in water. And this is in carbon dioxide. Okay, and then what I had told you was you don't need to learn this by heart. There is a way in which you can find it out using the atomic masses which you already know. For example, if I ask you the question, how, in what percent, in what proportion, question to you, in what proportion by mass do hydrogen and nitrogen combine to form ammonia? Whose formula is, can someone help me with ammonia's formula? NH3. To form NH3 is, can you just find it out and tell me?
So the ratio, can I answer, sir? Can I answer?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the atomic mass of nitrogen is 14, and the atomic mass of hydrogen is 1. So it will be 14 to 1 if you're just looking at nitrogen and hydrogen.
See,
But
if you say,
because it's NH3, it would be 14 to 3.
14:3. You should mention it like this: 14:3.
14:3. Yes.
Okay, because you're not interested. You're interested in the compound NH3.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, the reverse of what we are doing is what they actually found out. Because they found out hydrogen and oxygen is 1:8. Okay, we are able to, okay, I'll mention this to you in a bit. Okay, but it is from this we know the secret of a relative atomic mass, and from there we know a bit about atomicity, and then we are able to come out with molecular formula. So don't worry if you're not able to get the link now, but this particular law, the law of constant proportion, because then they didn't know the formula. They didn't know H2O, the formula for water is H2O. They didn't know that. They didn't know that oxygen is 16 and hydrogen atomic mass is 1. They didn't know that. This constant composition has helped them in trying to come out with this relative atomic mass scale. Okay, that is what I will put next. Relative atomic mass. Are you okay with this, guys? Did you? So if I give you any chemical compound, you will be able to tell me the mass percentage for each of these, right? If I say
Yes,
calcium oxide, if I say calcium oxide, can you guys do it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, calcium is I think 40.
Yes, sir. It would be. Can I answer, sir?
Yeah, go ahead. Oxygen
it
will
be 5:1.
Calcium is 40. Oxygen here is 16.
Oh yes, 6. Oh wait, then
5:2.
Yeah,
5:2.
5:2. by mass. Five parts of, we should say 5 parts of calcium and 2 parts of oxygen combined by mass in order to form calcium oxide. Is it all right,
Sir,
guys?
can you go to the other slide, Excel sheet ones?
Once, okay, I'll do that.
Done, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so once,
Sir,
tell me, Ma.
could we have a break now for 5 minutes?
Sure. Now it's 5:38. Can you guys assemble back in 5 minutes? I want to get a few more things done. So today, try to come as quickly as you can.
Yes, sir.
Please.
I was telling you about this thing called a relative atomic mass. Okay, so through these experiments, what happened is they realized, yeah, this hydrogen fellow is there, no? He is the lightest element. Okay, and then oxygen was figuring out in most of their chemical reactions. Okay, so they first they arbitrarily gave hydrogen. He's the lightest fellow, no? So let us give this fellow some mass is equal to 1. So it is not 1 gram, it is not 1 kg, it is just an arbitrary value 1. Okay, and then they said, "Array, oxygen is 8 times as heavy as hydrogen." So they decided to give oxygen the value of 8. So in the early, when you're talking about this atomic masses, the earliest standard for comparing the mass of the atoms was actually hydrogen. So hydrogen, they said, is the Bachu fellow, give him 1. And how many times heavy the other element is with respect to hydrogen, you give that. So if supposing you have an element X that was 25 times as heavy as hydrogen, it would have got the atomic mass of 25. You're following this now? Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yes, sir.
sorry, come again?
So we said yes, sir.
Okay, fair enough. So that is how this comparative, when you say relative means with respect to, more than, okay? More than. So hydrogen was the first, comparison scale. Then what happened was, some scientists said, yeah, oxygen, we should consider, because with respect to hydrogen, this being so low, right? The atomic masses of some of the elements started going into double digit, triple digit and all. They said, yeah, we want some element which has more mass. So it becomes easy for us to compare. So then what they did, they all have conferences. They all have various conventions. They'll go gang up, they'll have a party, and then they'll decide that to come out with a new standard. Okay. So then what they did was they decided to use oxygen next as a comparative scale. And this was there for a long time. Oxygen used to be the standard. So oxygen was 8. That was the standard. And if any element was more than oxygen, they would say how many times more. Okay, and then they will assign it the mass. So that came next. Oxygen as a standard came next. Then what happened? They decided that carbon. This was in 20th century actually. I think in the year 1960 or 1956. I'm not very sure about this, but in the mid 20th century, carbon isotope 12. They decided this was the best and we have to use that as a standard. Okay, then they said, yeah, you take a carbon atom of the isotope variety 12, take 1/12 of that. Okay, carbon 12, and you assign this fellow as the base unit for the atomic masses. Base unit for relative atomic mass. Okay, so now as per the latest, whenever you say relative atomic mass, then we are all comparing it with 1/12 of a carbon atom, of which variety. Carbon comes in various isotopes. We have to be very specific. We are talking about carbon with isotope 12 as the variety. Okay, so you take this carbon pizza. You take this carbon pizza and you divide it into 12 parts. Okay, I'm not very good at this division. Then you take this one pizza part. This part becomes 1/12. 1/12 of what? This pizza was carbon 12. So this one slice becomes 1/12 of carbon 12. Then you say, hey, this slice, you frame it. This is the base. So this pizza slice now becomes the base for all the atomic masses. This is 1/12 of carbon isotope 12. This is the latest standard for a relative Are we okay with this, guys?
Yes, sir.
So when we say hydrogen, and this has been given as 1U. Okay, so this fellow is one slice, 1/12 of this slice. No, don't keep calling him 1/12, 1/12. Call this fellow as 1U. Okay, so when you say hydrogen is equal to 1, that means we are telling hydrogen is the same as this fellow's mass. When you say helium is equal to 4, when you say atomic mass of helium is equal to 4, right? That means he is 4 times as heavy as this slice. That's why it's called 4U. When you say oxygen is equal to 8, that means you're telling this oxygen atom is 8 times as heavy as this slice, 8U. Are you following this, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because what happened is they don't know what the atom's actual mass is. Only recently they have been able to measure it properly. Okay, and anyways, when we are doing all these calculations, we don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of what is the actual mass. All of us are very happy in working with relative masses. Okay, did you follow this, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this relative atomic mass has got its own history, with hydrogen being the first standard. Hydrogen is 1 and oxygen is 8. Okay, possibly because of all these law of constant proportions, the way hydrogen oxygen is combining, they know all that stuff, right? So they decided to give that scale. You know what? Actually, hydrogen is 1 and oxygen is not 8. Oxygen is 16. Sorry, because oxygen is 8. 8 to the 16. So hydrogen is 1 and oxygen is 16 scale. Okay, then they shifted. They said, no, let's not use hydrogen. We will say oxygen is equal to 16 as the scale. And then the third iteration, they said, let's chuck both of these and let's take 1/12 the carbon of variety 12, isotope 12 as the base, and we designate it as 1U and start comparing all the other elements with respect to this U. And this is what the relative atomic mass means. So when you're calculating H2SO4, okay, you're calculating the relative molecular mass. When you're saying hydrogen is 2 plus sulfur is 32 plus oxygen is 16 into 4. Okay, 2 plus 32 plus 64, and you're making this as 98. Please remember to suffix it with U. Okay, so this U means it is 98 times as heavy as this piece. And what is this piece? This piece itself is 1/12 of carbon of isotope 12. And this U is not grams, this U is not kgs. This U is called unified mass. Kalesh, are you following this path?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes to quickly make some notes around this. And if you're done, we can go ahead. Niranjan, are you taking notes, my dear?
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to tell this as a story for you. Please continuously keep jotting down the points. I'll upload the video also.
Yes, sir. Done.
Done, sir.
Raji, Aditi, Rohan, Kriti, please
Done, sir.
turn your camera on.
Done, sir.
All right.
So my internet connection's a bit shaky. I wasn't.
Okay, no
able to
problem.
hear.
No problem. Keep yours. Yeah. Happened with me too.
So my internet connection's also quite slow. So
Okay. So therein we come to the law of constant proportion we have understood. So now what happened with all these facts put together, the atomic theory was proposed by our Dalton brother, okay, where he said, the atoms are indivisible and, they combine with each other. Do you guys know what Dalton's atomic theory is? I think you should be knowing.
Yes.
Sir.
If you want, I can just quickly, show you that slide. This is what it is. Advika, can you quickly read out the 4 or 5 postulates of Dalton's atomic theory?
Yes, sir. Dalton's atomic theory: matter is made up of tiny particles called atoms. Atoms are indivisible and cannot be created or destroyed in a chemical reaction. Atoms of a given element are similar in mass and properties.
Hold on a minute. Atoms of a given element are similar in mass and property. So what he's telling is, if you're selecting oxygen, you cannot have oxygen atom 1 and oxygen atom 2 being different than each other. Both of these are identical in all respects. They are like clones of each other. So if you take one element, means they are all going to be same. That's what atoms of a given element are similar. It means, go ahead.
Atoms of different elements have different masses and properties.
Obviously, because if you take hydrogen is a small Tingu fellow, oxygen is a heavier fellow, chlorine is even more heavier. So they all are different. Okay, they may be the small unit, but they are all different from each other. Go ahead.
Atoms combine in a small whole number ratios to form compounds. In a given compound, the relative number and kind of atoms are constant.
Okay, so these are some of the postulates that were given by Dalton. That means the first step towards the atomic theory has come in 1808 by this Dalton fellow. Someone, go ahead.
So the third one is proven wrong.
Correct. Means if you discard the isotope part of it, right? That's what you're hinting at, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
yeah, but here what you should say is carbon isotope 12, if you take, all of them are similar to each other.
yes, sir.
Yeah, very good catch though.
Even the second one is.
Don't get into the quantum realm. In fact, they didn't know electron, proton, neutrons existed. Okay, but if for all practical purposes, if you take as far as physical chemistry is concerned, we are only dealing with atom at the atom level, right? Of course, electrons are exchanged, but atom as a unit is the base unit, isn't it? So to that extent, this is true. But, as far as the latest model is concerned, we have many more particles, quarks, gluons, leptons, okay? The standard model, I think some class I had explained to them what particles were existing. I don't know for you or 10th standard, I don't know. But that's called the standard model.
Sir, not for us.
For you only, no?
No, sir, not for us.
Demo class.
Then someday I will try to explain what is the latest model for explaining this elements and compounds. In fact, not only that, it can explain everything in the universe basically. Okay, so that's what is called the standard model now. And electron is the base particle. It continues to be a base particle, but protons, neutrons are not the fundamental particles. They are in turn composed of other, subatomic particles. Okay, so we will discuss about that in some other class. But basically, in terms of our chronology, Dalton's atomic theory comes after this law of constant proportion was postulated by Proust. Is it all right, guys?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
that is where I have made a small note. This is the genesis for the atomic theory and with the concept of relative atomic masses, which has come into picture. 1808 marked the day.
So what exactly is?
What exactly is?
Genesis.
Genesis means starting point. That is in that context I mentioned this. This is the genesis.
Okay, sir.
If that seems too heavy, starting point, let me put it. Okay. Then we quickly move on to the next event. That is in 1808, there was one more scientist called Gay-Lussac. Okay, what this gentleman did, he gave, once again, if you see, this is a part of gas laws. He has given a pressure-temperature relationship. Okay, so briefly, I will talk about that. He says that you take any particular gas, the pressure of the gas is directly proportional to the temperature of the gas. We have already seen this when we were discussing about that piston cylinder experiment, right? When pressure increases, when temperature increases, the velocity of the particles increase, kinetic energy increases, therefore pressure exerted by the gas also increases, okay? So he said that pressure and temperature are proportional to each other, okay? Or he said that P1 by T1 is equal to P2 by T2 is equal to P3 by T3. Amrita, are you following this, ma?
Yes, sir.
When I mean pressure, it is what is the pressure exerted means force exerted over a given area, right? Because see, when these gases, these are the gas particles, right? These gas particles are going to constantly move. That means they are hitting the walls of the container. When they are hitting the walls of the container, they are exerting some force. Gases move, hit walls of container. When they are hitting the walls of the container, that means they are exerting force. Kadika, are you following this?
Yes, sir.
They are exerting force. Exerting force over a given area means it is called pressure. Force over a given area or thrust per given area is called pressure. That means this is pressure. Okay, why did the gases begin to move faster in the first place? Because you lit fire. You put temperature under them, right? That means he has given the relationship between the pressure exerted by the gas on the container versus with respect to its temperature. If you are having more temperature, More temperature inside, that means you will give more pressure on the container. Okay. So now we have three laws. You have Boyle's law, you have Charles' law, then now we have what is called the Gay-Lussac's law. So if you combine all these three things together, okay, you will come up with this relationship called unified gas law, which says P1 V1 by T1 is equal to P2 V2 by T2 is equal to P3 V3 by T3. This in fact is called the combined gas law. Means you're taking all these fellows, Charles' law, Boyle's law, and Gay-Lussac's law, combining them together and coming up with this law. Advika, I see you deep breathing. Deep breathing in the sense, is the class getting over your head? It is simple only, no?
Yes, sir.
Amartya, are you following this?
Yes, sir.
Any questions so far, guys? So much?
No, sir.
No, sir, no doubts.
Okay. I hope you have made a note till here.
So one. Done, sir.
Okay. So I'm trying to touch upon different concepts around the same area. I'm throwing words like increased velocity, increased energy, kinetic theory of gases, because all these are interrelated, but they are coming in different stages in time. Okay. Then what happened? This fellow Avogadro is there, no? He's the smart dude. Okay. This is in 1812. He observed all the gas laws. Okay. The Charles law, Boyle's law, Gay-Lussac's law. He observed all these fellows. Okay. And he looked at this particular experimental verification done by Gay-Lussac. Okay. I want so much to read this. So much, can you please read this one?
Water contains 2 volumes of hydrogen to 1 volume of oxygen. This was published by Gay-Lussac and von Humboldt. This along with Avogadro's volume law gave Cannizzaro the idea of molecular weights.
Okay. Don't worry about the last part which I said. Cannizzaro. Cannizzaro is someone you will not hear about him till 12th standard. Not even in 12th standard, but he's a very important scientist who formalized the molecular weights. Okay, but here what I want you to know is Gay-Lussac is the guy, okay, because till now what happened, mass percent ratio by mass, you know, hydrogen and oxygen, how do they combine? They combine 1:8 in water. Okay, but if you look at this this experiment done by Gay-Lussac, right? I'll just mention to you what it means. This is a very important finding. Okay. Here I'm just trying to put it in blocks. We have discussed about step number 1. This is the chemical analysis that happened, and you know that Cinnabar and hydrogen, oxygen, all that stuff. Then this is the step 2 which we discussed. That is our Priestley and the law of constant proportion. Then this is the step 3 which we discussed, which is nothing but this Dalton's atomic theory. Okay, so even in Dalton, he didn't know that hydrogen existed as H2, oxygen existed as O2. They didn't know that. They thought hydrogen is something like this. One atom of hydrogen was shown like this. Okay, plus 1 atom of oxygen will give you a molecule of hydrogen and oxygen. This is what was his initial thought. Okay, it is not necessary that always combine 1 with 1. They may do 1 with 2 also. But that 2 are not a molecule. They are 2 separate atoms. He thought one atom of hydrogen may combine with 2 separate atoms of oxygen. So when they say elements combine in simple ratios, in this case it is 1:1 ratio. In this case it is 1:2 ratio. That is, 1 atom of hydrogen combines with 2 atoms of oxygen. That's what he thought. Okay, because that time the concept of diatomic molecule was not existing. They didn't know H2 and O2 were the way hydrogen and oxygen used to exist in nature. They were not aware of that. Okay, this is something which you have to remember. Concept of molecules didn't exist then. Then we mentioned about this Gay-Lussac's law we have just seen. Now we are going to discuss about this fellow Avogadro's law. Okay, so before you come to Avogadro's law, what you have to realize is please stay with me. I'm trying to get a couple of things out of the way. Say this is hydrogen, okay? This is oxygen. Oxygen. This is water. Hydrogen plus oxygen gives rise to water. I am presenting to you a volume-wise picture. Not a mass-wise picture. I'm presenting to you a volume-wise picture. What this means is, when this fellow Gay-Lussac did now, he said, yeah, let me take, whenever I want to form water, I always have to take 2 liters of hydrogen. Okay, I'm giving you an example. And these 2 liters of hydrogen will combine with 1 liter of oxygen. And it is going to give you 2 liters of water. That means volume-wise, it was always a 2:1 combination. Are you following this, guys?
Yes, sir.
What you can do is you can imagine a cylinder. Hydrogen can be put in some cylinder. No? So you imagine hydrogen in a cylinder and, and this is like a 2-liter Pepsi bottle filled with hydrogen. And this is oxygen. Oxygen, you only have to take 1 liter Pepsi bottle.
Sir.
And hold on, let me just complete. You combine them, you're getting water. And this water is again filling a 2-liter Pepsi bottle. In fact, it's not water, it is going to be steam. Okay. This is what he observed. So if you take 44.4 liters, this would be 22.2 liters, and here you will get 44.4 liters. Okay, whatever it is always used to be a 2:1. At the end of the reaction, inside this hydrogen cylinder, nothing would be there, completely reacted. Oxygen also, hydrogen completely reacted, oxygen also completely reacted, nothing is left out, and water is completely formed. That means these guys who were in these cylinders are completely used up, nothing is balanced. Are you able to follow this, guys?
Sir,
Yes,
then
sir.
there should be 3 liters of water, right?
No. It will be 2 liters of water. This is volume wise. Okay.
Okay, sir.
This is volume wise because see, this 2 liters of hydrogen will be there. No, if you look at it mass wise, this is volume wise, this is twice. If you look at it mass wise, this will be, if I take 44.4 liters, I know something that you don't know. Okay, this is like, so it will be 4 grams. And this is 22.2 liters, right? So this fellow will be 32 grams. I'll tell you how I'm confidently telling this. And here, definitely you will get 36 grams. Okay, the law of conservation of mass is this. Whatever mass is going inside in terms of reactants, it has to match the mass of the products. But volume-wise, you need not have that, volume initially is equal to volume final. But mass, it respects it. There is no law of conservation of volume. There is only law of conservation of mass. Is it all right, Shruti?
Yes, sir.
But it is a good point for you to catch, okay? Because 2 volume plus 1 volume, in your mind, it should be 3 volumes, but it is 2. It's only 2 liters. This was an experimental finding by Gay-Lussac and that gentleman, Humboldt. Okay, so this finding made Avogadro to come up with the Avogadro's law. Okay, because Avogadro, no, he put too many things together. Gay-Lussac is giving this volume-wise relationship, and that fellow Dalton is telling when atoms combine, the individual atoms have to combine with each other. Okay, so if hydrogen and oxygen have to combine, they used to be, like 1:1 or 1:2 or 2:1. So with all these things, the exact the thought process, we will discuss at a later stage when you are, at a certain level. Okay, but right now, what happened? You can just learn the law. He said that equal volumes of all gases under similar conditions of temperature and pressure contain equal number of molecules. I repeat, equal volumes of all gases under similar conditions of temperature and pressure contain equal number of molecules. Did you make a note of this, guys?
Yes, sir. Done, sir.
Yes, sir.
That means let's quickly put some diagram and try to understand. Here, I'm taking 1 liter of some gas, hydrogen. Okay. Then I'm also quickly taking 1 liter volume. I have to take 1 liter of oxygen. Then I'm quickly going to take 1 liter of nitrogen. Okay, this is what hydrogen. This is what nitrogen. What is this? Oxygen. All of them 1 liter. 1 liter. 1 liter. Okay. That is, I have taken equal volumes of all gases. I have taken 3 gases now. Under similar conditions of temperature and pressure, means we are all taking it in the same room. Okay, I am in Bangalore. I'm assuming the atmospheric pressure is something 1. Atmospheric pressure is some 76 centimeters of mercury, whatever it is. And I'm in the same room. So temperature also is like 30 degrees centigrade. So that is what it means. Under similar conditions of, don't take one in hydrogen in Bangalore and compare with the Bombay high temperature. No, the conditions for the gases have to be in the same conditions. Okay, so what? I have taken equal volume, equal. Then he said they all contain equal number of molecules. That means if you are going to count inside, no? You get some number X here. Count all these fellow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, X. Like that, you count these fellows. That also will be X. And you count this fellow. This also will be X. That means the gases may be different. Okay, but if you take equal volumes of these fellows, okay, 1 liter, 10 liters, 22.4 liters, okay, keep all the volumes the same. Go ahead and somehow count them, count the molecules inside. They will all be the same. This is what is called Avogadro's law. Go ahead.
So, like to keep all these gases in the same.
Your voice is breaking. Can you speak again?
So keep all these gases in the same room, sir.
You remove your video and speak. Your voice is breaking again.
So,
Okay. Did anyone hear his question?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir. It was breaking for us as well.
It was breaking. No? Okay.
So maybe you could put it in the chat.
Speak up. Can you please speak up?
So maybe he could put it in the chat.
Okay. You can chat your question if we are not able to hear you. Okay, so this is what is called the Avogadro's law. Okay. Did you guys follow till here? Advika, are we good? We both?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Meghna?
Yes, sir.
So next what I'll do, I will extend this law and say 22.4 liters of hydrogen, 22.4 liters of nitrogen, and 22.4 liters of oxygen at standard temperature and pressure. Standard temperature and pressure means I will tell you there STP, some condition is there. 0 degrees centigrade, 1 atmospheric pressure is called standard temperature and pressure. Okay. So these fellows, they will all contain same number of molecules, na? But here you took 1 liter, here you're taking 22.4 liters, isn't it? Now this X has now a number that is called the Avogadro number, Na, Na, Na. And now we know this Avogadro number to be equal to 6.023 into 10 to the power of 23. This is the beauty of all these fellows, na? They have been doing all simple stuff so far, and suddenly you have something very, very significant. Okay, you're telling equal volumes of all gases under similar conditions contain same number of molecules. Now suddenly they say you take it as 22.4 liters. Any gas under 0 degrees centigrade, 1 atmospheric pressure, which is also called STP, 0 degrees centigrade, 1 atmospheric pressure. Okay, they will all contain, you were telling X, no? Now that X has got a value, that value is 6.023 10 raised to 23. That is called Avogadro's number. Na, Avogadro's number. This is a very huge number, 6.023 to 10 raised to 23. Please remember, this is a very important value for you to keep in your mind.
How did they find this number, sir?
That is a very good question, and there is an explanation, and this was scientifically observed only in the 20th century they found out, I think, recently. Okay, the theoretical basis for it is with respect to some Brownian motion, how the particles move and all. Okay, but it has been experimentally proved that this is what it is.
Okay, sir.
We will take it as a topic as to, see, this becomes a little more complex now. If you want to know how this happened, a lot of other allied information you need to know. Okay, first of all, I feel I am imposing you with more information than required, but I have to present to you the correct chronology of events. Otherwise, no, you will think that all these facts are disconnected. I'm trying to spin a story around this. But this particular thing is very important. This volumetric finding by this fellow Gay-Lussac, no, that here this is 2 volumes of this. It is combining with 1 volume of this to get 2 volumes of this. Okay, this is a very important finding. This coupled with the fact that this can react with either one of this fellow or 2 of this fellow can react with 1 of this fellow. That is what is Dalton's theory, because these guys cannot divide themselves. Okay, both these things together forms the stepping stone for your atomicity in trying to tell H2, O2, H2O, all this molecular formula that you're telling, no, it comes from these 2 simple, experiments. That is Gay-Lussac's finding of this, and the entire gas laws synthesized, and along with Dalton's law, this fellow has put everything together into this very beautiful law. Very innovative, very intuitive fellow he is, Avogadro. Very, very important piece of information. Okay. Now, the last thing which I want to tell you, okay, hold on to your seats, is that if you take this, what is this gas which you have taken? This gas we have taken first is hydrogen, no? Now, last piece of information. I am going to take 2 grams of hydrogen. I am getting you the mass picture now. Why 2 grams? Boss, I know hydrogen is H2. So 2U, I am putting G. Then I am taking nitrogen. Nitrogen I know is N2. N is 14. 14 into 2 is 28. So I'll take 28 grams. And then what is the last gas? Last gas is oxygen. Oxygen is O2. O2 is 32. So I say 32 grams. Okay. Can you guess that if you take by mass 2 grams, if you take by mass 28 grams of nitrogen and 32 grams of oxygen, what their volumes will be at STP? Any guess?
They will be equal.
They will all be equal, and they are all equal to 22.4. That is why this 22.4 is very important. Okay, so this brings us to an important definition called mole. Okay, so this 2 grams I have taken, no, this 2 grams is nothing but H2. That means the molecular mass of hydrogen, 1 into 2, 2U. And instead of telling U, I am cutting the U and replacing it with G, gram. Okay, so this is called gram molecular mass, GMM, or gram molecular weight. Next, how did I get 28? Boss, I am talking about nitrogen. Nitrogen I know is a diatomic gas N2. Nitrogen atomic mass is 14. 14 into 2 is 28. So 28 U relative atomic mass, molecular mass. Remove the U, replace it with G. So this becomes gram molecular mass or gram molecular weight of nitrogen. And this becomes the gram molecular weight of oxygen. Okay. So this 2G, 28G and 38G are called 1 mole of hydrogen. This is called 1 mole of nitrogen, and this is called 1 mole of oxygen. So therein comes the mole concept. Don't get confused by mole to be a short form of molecule. No. Okay, mole is a unit. Okay, so how you define the mole? Okay, first you say 1 mole is nothing but gram molecular mass. This is something which you have to put it inside your heads. Aditi, can you please read aloud and tell me what you mean by a mole?
1 mole is equal to gram molecular mass.
1 gram molecular mass. Okay. So can you tell me what is 1 mole of sulfur, Aditi?
I'm not sure, sir.
So you have to find out what is the atomic mass of sulfur. Okay. Atomic, because sulfur we say will exist as an atom. It is 32. 32, you put G, 32 grams. So 32 grams of sulfur is called 1 mole of sulfur. Are you getting this, Shreya?
Sir,
Huh. Go ahead.
So how do we use mole in chemistry? Like, for what do we use mole?
Okay, that's a good question. This forms the foundation for all of stoichiometry. Stoichiometry means, you have to measure things and you have to make the compounds, right? For example, if you have a huge chemical factory and you're making steel, okay, steel is is made out of carbon and iron, but it's a huge process. You need some catalysts. You need to take carbon in the proper proportion, Fe2O3 in the proper proportion, and you want to get some steel. So if someone says, I want 1000 kgs of steel, how much kg of carbon I need, how much kg of Fe2O3 I need, right? How many tons I need. So that entire calculation, the foundation, that is all called stoichiometry. Okay, how much mass I have to take. Recipe will be discussed, no? 1 spoon of chili powder, 2 spoons of salt will give masala powder. Like that, how should I take the ingredients in order to maintain known quantities of sulfuric acid, steel, organic compounds? Okay, this is the basis for that. Very, very important concept, mole concept. Without this chemistry, you can't have a scientific, production of all the chemicals. All right. So Kalash will tell me what will be 1 mole of water, Kalash?
Sir, is it 34 grams?
34 Allah. Oxygen is 16. Nah? O is only 1. And hydrogen is 2. That means it is 18. Okay. And then you have to put a grams around it. That means 1 mole of water. 12th standard students, just give me 5 minutes. 1 mole of water is going to be 18 grams.
yes.
Okay. So, Akshita, what will be 1 mole of ammonia? Akshita?
17.
Very good. NH3. N is atomic mass of nitrogen is 17. Hydrogen is 1. 1 into 3 is 3. Atomic mass of nitrogen is 14. and hydrogen is 1. 1 into 3 is 3. 14 plus 3 is 17. You are going to put U because that is the unified mass. Instead of U, you put G, 17G. So that becomes 1 mole of ammonia. Okay, like that you can go. Now you know sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is 98. So 1 mole of sulfuric acid is going to be 98, not U, but G, gram molecular mass. That is why how to do the molecular mass is very, very important. If you know how to do molecular, first is you need to know how to write molecular formula. And second is you need to know how to calculate the molecular mass. And once you know both these things, you can tell me what is the mass of a mole of the substance. Is it all right, guys?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So we will be ending this class. We'll be ending this class with one important note. Okay, that is this 1 mole of substance, 1 mole of any substance. Okay, will have Avogadro number of molecules. Okay, that means if you take this 32 grams of sulfur, right? 32 grams of sulfur is very small, is a small heap like this. Okay, you take 1 mole of water, 1 mole of water, 18 grams will be so much. Ammonia, ammonia 17 grams. Ammonia is a gas at room temperature. Okay, it has some volume. 1 mole of H2SO4. H2SO4, okay, if you put it in water, it is a liquid in room temperature. Aqueous, okay, liquid. So in each of these measures, in this 98 grams of this fellow, in 17 grams of this gas, in 18 grams of water, and in 32 grams of sulfur, which is a solid, you go ahead and count the number of molecules if you can. Go ahead and count it. They will all be the same, 6.023 into 10 raised to 23. So I want you to remember these two statements side by side. One is 1 mole is nothing but a gram molecular mass or gram molecular weight of a substance. And the second statement which you should remember is 1 mole of any substance contains Avogadro number of molecules. Shreya, can you repeat the two statements for me?
Yes, so 1 mole of any substance is equal to Avogadro number of molecules, which is 6.023 into 10 to the power of 23, and 1 mole is equal to gram molecular mass.
Any substance, right? So if I give you the molecular formula, you can find, you remove the U and put G. And that is nothing but 1 mole, all right? And the third thing is 1 mole of any gas. We have already seen this. 1 mole of any gas occupies 22.4 liters at STP. These three statements. This is the first statement which we already saw. We started off by saying 1 liter of oxygen, 1 liter of nitrogen, 1 liter of hydrogen. They all contain same number of molecules. Then we said 22.4 liters. Then we said we linked up. All right, this 22.4 liters is nothing but 1 mole of a gas. Okay, so that is how we, discuss. We end up with the mole concept. I will start the next class with a revisit on the mole concept, but the other things which we have discussed, the law of constant proportion, the relative atomic mass, which we discussed, right? All this you should kind of revise. I'll upload this video and share the link to you. Please go through it once or twice and come prepared for the next class. Second thing is that worksheet which I have uploaded, that is going to polish your skills around calculating the molecular formula and balancing. It is a must that you should do it. Next Tuesday when you come, look at Google Classroom and really work at, do your best at the worksheet and come prepared. Is it all right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much for your patience. See
Thank you,
Bye.
sir. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.